Welcome in to the FFPC Hardway Draft Recap. I'm Aiden LaCour, your host. Joining me as always, Dave Turp, and very special thank you, Dan Williamson from the GOAT District at Overhyped Sleeper on Twitter is joining us to discuss his draft and his overall thoughts surrounding this early 2023 ADP. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure to be here, guys. It was a fun draft, and looking forward to diving in and kind of tearing it apart with you.
It's definitely one of the best drafts of the year so far. I mean, you guys every year just are first in line to get the drafts out there and never disappoints.
And for those
That's
who don't
good.
know, the Hardway Draft features the best in the high stakes industry. I think that's why people love it so much, right? Is you're not only getting this early ADP, these early drafts in. It's with the people who people take advice from and really look to kind of set the ADP.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, this is, we may not have a lot of the guys who are like the, big names on big sites or anything like that. But, everybody in this thing has a lot of skin in the game every year. So, these are people who are putting their money where their mouth is. And, we kind of, Dave probably hates us at the start of the year. Just because and Alex, because we're bugging them all the time. Come on, let's get this thing going. Let's get this thing going, and, we all want to, we're out there and we're like, we gotta be first. We don't want to be, we don't want to have it polluted by some other ADP of some other draft. We just want to get out there and do it on our own.
Before we look into the draft, I kind of had just a general question for the audience who may be trying to get into some of these early drafts is how do you go into these drafts when there's a loose ADP is starting to be set, but really free agency obviously hasn't hit, the draft hasn't hit. What is your kind of strategy going into this?
For the most part, I mean, really what you have to keep in mind is everybody in the draft has the exact same information as you, or at least potentially that's what they've got. My goal is to have better information than anybody else, to be far enough up, and be thinking about rookies a little bit more, be thinking about free agency a little bit more, and try to, sort of predict where ADP is going, not necessarily where it's at right now. And I think everybody who's in there is kind of trying to do that to a certain extent. There are some who are just kind of, it looks like they're in it for fun. They just want to draft. It's fun to draft. You never know what's going to happen. But I don't worry about, the things that we don't know too much because everybody in the league has we all have the same blind spots.
Let me throw up the draft board right now. Dan, you had drafted out of the 9 spot here, if I'm recalling correctly, and you got rave reviews on your draft on Twitter. You were posting.
You did very well.
Postboard. You started off CD, Amon-Ra, Mahomes, Kittle, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, Jordan Addison. We can go on. We'll get into it. But kind of the start of the draft, CD and Amon-Ra, you think that just looking at it, and we kind of talked briefly on the show, there's always like, oh, is this some of these running backs are kind of hitting the age 27 drop off? Is this going to be just a receiver heavy year again, and you're going to be invested in those early round receivers?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more likely to invest in those early round receivers. I'm glad that people on Twitter like the draft. I definitely see holes in it. Things that I would have loved to have cleaned up, but of course, the first time around, everybody's kind of taking shots in the dark. But like CeeDee Lamb, if I had it to do over again, I think I'd have probably taken Jonathan Taylor in there. I debated that, and I went Lamb, and then all of a sudden, we hear Mike McCarthy's going to be calling the plays in Dallas, and I'm like, that might have been a bad pick. So. But I don't think it's a terrible pick. I mean, it's a pick that should keep me in the game, and that's basically in the first few rounds in a draft like this, especially early season. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't lose it by just making really stupid choices.
And then my question, though, is, so you mentioned the Mike McCarthy as a play caller, which is music to Terp's ears as an Eagles fan.
But don't forget that idiot Schottenheimer they just hired, too.
I mean, just Cowboys on the spot. What receivers would you take over CD if you had to redo it? Is Diggs and Brown much higher up on your board than CD now?
I think Diggs and CD are kind of equivalent. If Diggs was a little bit younger, I might have him over CD. I think it's a very close race right now. I'm probably putting A.J. Brown over CD, but other than that, there's no other receivers I would have taken there. So there's just a couple, I felt like Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown would have been the picks I might have made in hindsight. But again, I think CD is not a terrible pick there.
And then Theo, what one of your co-hosts on the Ghost Church was supposed to join us. Time conflict, nowhere, so he couldn't. But I was really wanting, to ask him about. He was picking second and went Jamar Chase at 2, and I've been seeing that a lot. Jamar Chase's ADP currently in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament. This draft was just a best ball draft, but just I'm using the Never Too Early Best Ball current ADP for reference. He's going at 3rd overall. He's wide receiver 2. Do you think that trend's going to stick? And what's the love for Chase? Obviously, he's dynamic. We know that. But Terp was even saying I thought Kelsey would be going over him. I thought Kupp would be getting more love. But Chase at 2, 3 is very popular. And I just kind of wanted your thoughts on Jamar Chase and where he's going right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really safe pick. I think you can make the case against Kelsey just on his age, and there is a potential drop off there. Christian McCaffrey, I think you can make a case against, really any running back, but McCaffrey, as long as they had another healthy running back with him in San Francisco, and of course as long as Deebo Samuel was healthy, he wasn't getting that massive workload like what he was getting in Carolina. And I think that does make a difference. For me, I don't see McCaffrey as being the absolute board buster that he's been in past years.
I agree.
So, it's just he's a first round talent. He's a guy who can get you probably 20 points every week, but he's getting those insane 35, 40 point weeks. I just don't see it happening as much.
And Terp, I'll direct this question to you, and then Dan, you can also chime in here. Terp, off the bat, looking at this board, who are some guys you're already seeing I think they're going way too high? McCaffrey's already won for you. Is there any others in these first couple of rounds you're I think people are already reaching on them?
I would say the questions surrounding Tua, Jalen Waddle's a little higher with some of the guys that came after him. I mean, St. Brown to me is a slam dunk over Jalen Waddle. Also, obviously, you have Tyreek Hill there. Garrett Wilson, it's hard to ignore what he did down the stretch. And if they get Aaron Rodgers, which is still a question, but everything about this draft is a question. Garrett Wilson is a first-round pick. And I don't know if there's anybody that can debate that. I mean, he looked great last year with me, Dan, and you throwing him the football. So you add a guy like Aaron Rodgers with a guy that's coming, leaving where he started. If it happens, obviously is a big if. I just think Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf's another guy that, I would probably think about it. But Jalen Waddle is probably the number one guy. Mark Andrews is also another guy that, to me, he hasn't been great with Lamar Jackson. So let's just say they pay Lamar Jackson. He wasn't a superstar. Most of his big numbers 2 years ago were with Huntley. And we saw that debacle this year. I just feel like there's better values at tight end, especially with Kelsey being such an advantage right now. Goddard, Hawkinson, even Kittle. You keep going on the list. Kyle Pitts, maybe if you want to jump back on that bandwagon. Mark Andrews, to me, over some of the guys got drafted after him. And we know my boy Travis Etienne. He's too low. Way too low.
Dan, same question for you though. Was there any guys during this draft where I'm surprised he went that high? A lot of it on Twitter, right? Because there was a lot of commentary. Was the Najee pick in that second round? People found him very high, but that was just a constant. But Dan, is there anyone else for you that you thought went too high?
Yeah, I thought the Najee pick was a little bit early for me. And to Terp's point on Mark Andrews, I think that's a great point, and the reason why Andrews has been where he's been is because he's kind of a lot of times been the only game in town. And we know that Baltimore doesn't really want it to be that way. I mean, they want another receiver involved. They want Rashad Bateman. They want, somebody else involved. They want those running backs involved. J.K. Dobbins was out for most of the year. So they're trying to make their offense just a little bit more broad-based, have some more options available, and those are the kind of things that are going to hurt Andrews as we go. So personally, I have Hawkinson over Andrews, but I thought this was maybe even a little bit early for Hawkinson. I just don't think that the second tight end needs to go as early as what they did here.
I agree.
Terp, you mentioned Garrett Wilson, right? Finished wide receiver 22 in the year, as you said, with all the quarterback issues, let's just say, that the Jets had. Dan, I noticed you took Jordan Addison, and we kind of know last 5 years, there's always been one rookie receiver who's finished at least wide receiver 25. Even in like arguably the worst year, you could argue was either this year with Wilson or Calvin Ridley all the way back in 2018. But since then, 2018 was Ridley. 2019 we got AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Debo. 2020 obviously Justin Jefferson. Then 2021 we got Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle. Who do you think is this guy this year? It's a weaker wide receiver class by all reports. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson are kind of the consensus top three. Are you riding Addison as a guy who you think is going to be that top 25 receiver, or you just think the trend's going to be Buck this year?
I think that the trend of wide receivers getting incorporated into the offenses a lot faster is here to stay. And I think there's a real thirst out there in the NFL teams for more wide receivers. They want more talent. It used to be that if you had two good wide receivers, then you were great. Now, a lot of teams, they want that third receiver, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver, but they want that third great receiving option. And so I think that's going to help put some pressure on to get these rookies incorporated quickly. I don't have a really strong answer on that as to, I think you're exactly right. JSN, Addison, and Quentin Johnson are really the top three. I'd have been happy with any of them. I was really hoping in that spot to have gotten Treylon Burks, but he went one pick before me. So, I just kind of felt like the time was right there to just go ahead and take one shot on a wide receiver. Otherwise, I probably would have gone running back there.
And Terp, Treylon Burks was one of your guys last year. Now, Rodgers to the Jets is popular. Rodgers to the Titans is picking up some steam as a really good fit. The Athletic had multiple articles about that. Obviously, he's going on his darkness retreat. Probably know more in the next week or two. But Terp, Treylon Burks he's popped up in this conversation. He's right here, went in round 7. You think if they get Rodgers, talk about stock booming. I think his could be. We could look back at this round 7 ADP and be like, oh, that was low.
1,000%. I mean, you saw the flash of the talent from the kid. I mean, he obviously had some rookie inconsistencies, injuries, and just quarterback play. Obviously, with Tannehill being banged up, the talent's there. I mean, they have nobody else. Robert Woods is a dust bucket. I mean, he's an average NFL receiver right now. I mean, he is what he is. No tight end of sorts. They still have Derrick Henry. They still want to run the football, but that AJ Brown got his. I'm not saying he's AJ Brown because he's not, but he has a ton of talent. And if they get somebody like Aaron Rodgers, like, this is why people always say, like, why do you do drafts early? Why do you do drafts? This is a little crazy early, but like most people wonder why. Because a guy like Treylon Burks, if Aaron Rodgers somehow makes it to Tennessee, he's a 4th round pick, maybe higher. I mean, think about it. Nobody else there.
I mean, I could see Burks getting steamed all the way up into the early 3rd or late 2nd if Rodgers ended up there.
I mean, you see, like, when news happens, like if you get a draft, like obviously like this or like, some of the other ones you'll see in the early one, I mean, you could easily like take advantage of some of these rookies because like you use Jordan Addison, as I said. If Jordan Addison finds a way to like the Chargers or like a team like that's, a perfect fit with a quarterback that's already made, maybe like a Buffalo or something like, very unlikely, but still something like that happens, he's going to get steamed up so much to where you're almost going to get to a point where you can't take him because he's just going to be so high up to where the questions are going to be too much right there.
You mentioned there's some teams in that first round and those 3 receivers we've already discussed, JSN, Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, where if they go there, and I think the Chargers have been kind of mocked as one, but also the Jaguars take another weapon.
Don't sleep on the Bengals either if T. Higgins moves on.
Yeah, the T. Higgins, obviously, with the contract situation, he might get moved. Obviously, no like landing spots have emerged. It's just still very preliminary. But if T. Higgins gets moved, is this 3.2 is where he went in this draft? Is that going to become a bargain? I mean, it seems like this is going to be where he's going if he stays in Cincinnati. But does that little outside chance he gets moved boost him into some of these early drafts?
Well, let's say for example he goes to Chicago. How does that move him up at all for you guys?
No, I think if anything, it drops him down.
Probably moves him down.
Yeah, so that's just the thing. I mean, if Higgins goes, he's probably going to go to a team that's really desperate at wide receiver for one reason or another. and it's just going to matter who the quarterback is. If it's a team that's desperate for a receiver with a good quarterback, then you're going to be looking at, like imagine if, I don't think it'd happen, but let's say the Chargers trade for him, then all of a sudden Higgins is a borderline, he's definitely early second round.
If not earlier.
Yeah, if not earlier. But if you're talking about the Bears, then that's a completely different story.
You mentioned the Chargers multiple times. You took Mike Williams in round 5. Obviously, Keenan Allen, uncertainty there. Mike Williams, so talented, so injury prone. What are you kind of a little bit deflated compared to where he was getting drafted last year? Obviously, he kind of hit round 3, early round 4 last year. Do you think there's almost some post-type sleeper buzz to Mike Williams if he can just stay healthy?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the thing is with Williams, it's always a question of health, and that makes him a little bit more of an intriguing pick to me, just because of the fact that generally, if this were a managed league where we're picking starting lineups, whether to start him or not, because if he's in the game, you're going to start him. And I don't mind him too much for the best balls either, because he does have those big spike weeks. Missing games is not ideal, but I'm projecting that Keenan Allen has maybe a 50% chance of staying with the Chargers right now, just because of his contract situation and where they're at on the salary cap. I mean, there's no way he's staying at his salary. He's going to have to get restructured.
No chance.
Or he's getting released. So it really comes down to, what do you think is going to happen with Keenan Allen?
Are you surprised that Keenan went 2 picks behind Mike Williams with all that uncertainty?
Not necessarily, because he's such a big name and he's been, so reliable in the past. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't surprise me. I figured he was probably going before it got back around to me. I was more hoping for in that spot Jerry Jeudy or Kyle Pitts to have fallen to get back to me, but I was pretty happy with the Williams over Allen pick. I think that's the way I feel about it right now, and we'll see if it stays that way.
And Terp, I want to get your thoughts on this first. We're going to kind of be bouncing all around the sport, but Terp, my favorite name, what I was most excited for in these early drafts, is Bijan Robinson. I think he's going to be every fantasy player's dream, right? It all depends on where he goes. Obviously, it's tough to talk about. He went as RB3, which is like I think there's a genuine chance, depending on where he goes, he could be my overall RB1. He actually, his ADP right now in the Never Too Early is right around pick 14, so he went about 4 picks earlier than he usually did. Terp, how high do you think he's going to end up going, depending on that landing spot?
The landing spot is everything. I mean, there's so many teams that could just screw it up and literally take him and just ruin, not long term, but first year, his value. If he gets in the right spot, I mean, geez, he could easily be RB1. So talented, does everything. There's no weakness in his game. In my opinion, he's one of the best running back prospects to come out in a really long time. Man, it's tough not to like the kid. I think, if anything, in this draft, he might be a value compared to where he could end up, because if he gets that right spot, that nut spot that everybody's hoping for, sky's the limit for this kid.
Terp, 2 questions on top of that. You're an Eagles fan. Eagles are commonly mocked him, whether it be some at pick 10, some at 30, 31. 1, do you think Howie does that? 2, do you think if he goes to the Eagles, let's say, does that help, or does that actually hurt him with how much goal line work Jalen Hurts gets?
I don't think it's the best spot for him. If I had a pick, it wouldn't be a top 5 spot that I would want him to land. If from a non-biased perspective, obviously the talented kid, I want him 100%, not at 10. But if he for some reason fell later and they moved up and got him, I'm fine with that. But from a fantasy perspective, it definitely wouldn't be a top 5 spot for me. I mean, Jalen Hurts and his rushing ability, they love mixing in other guys. I mean, I could see, Boston Scott, Gainwell will be back, obviously having a good playoffs. I don't think they're going to bring Miles Sanders back personally, but, I mean, if Robinson made it here, it wouldn't be great for fantasy, at least year 1.
Dan, another running back who's kind of been going this first rounds, actually went way later. He's been going on average about pick 12, and then Never Too Early. He went pick 17 here with Saquon Barkley. Obviously, really sputtered down the stretch. I was kind of, when I was researching prior to this interview, I'm kind of like, I was projecting, I think Bijan's stock rises from here and Saquon continues to go down. Do you agree with that, or do you think Saquon kind of this late first, early second is kind of where he settles in, and is that the right move?
Yeah, so Saquon, it really depends on landing spot for him as well, since he's a free agent. He could end up back with the Giants, or he could end up going somewhere else, and so that could have a huge impact, either positively or negatively for him. I think he's in about the right range here. I think you can make arguments for taking him before AJ Brown, Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and definitely Hawkinson and Andrews, if you want to. But I can also understand why people are putting the wide receivers up ahead of him. Just because of the fact that Barkley has kind of an injury history, and I think what we saw in 2022 is that he's 85-90% of the way back, but I wouldn't call him 100% of the way back. He was just not. He was lacking a step, I thought. I don't know. What do you guys think on that?
100%. I mean, he obviously had a great fantasy season, and
for sure,
the value you got from him where you drafted him most of the time was worth every second. But he didn't have that burst that I saw early in his career, and it definitely, the injury, could it come back this year? It obviously could. I mean, I hope he stays with the Giants, but he definitely looked like he missed a step. I mean, there's times where I thought he'd be gone, and somebody got him late. Like the spots that the holes were there, and normal Saquon Barkley, 80 yards touchdown, 50-yard touchdown, like in a breeze, and they weren't touchdowns. They were 8-yard gains, 10-yard gains, 11-yard gains. So
right.
We'll see where he lands, because that's very important.
I mean, no team I think is going to pay him or want him as much as the Giants will. I think it's hard to believe that he'll wind up anywhere else. We'll have to see. But Terp, there was a famous clip that went essentially viral on Twitter during the playoff game against the Eagles, and it was like 2018 Saquon houses this when he had the massive run. He just got caught. And even looking back to week 1 from last season to where he ended up, the toll. It's just, he's 26 years old. Injury history, whether fair or not, obviously he had the ACL, but a lot of his other stuff is fluke, right? Stepping on someone's foot, had to get the high ankle sprain. But 26, injury history, looked like he slowed down. A little bit concerning. One other name that I mentioned, Dan, that you took, that I was surprised he lasted that long based on how he finished, which was the flip side of Saquon in terms of starting off miserably and then finishing strong. Cam Akers came out of nowhere down the stretch. Probably didn't help owners because they probably weren't in contention too much. But Cam Akers, you got in round 8, was the last couple of weeks.
Very shockingly that he fell that far.
Cam Akers, I thought that was one of your best picks because we see the upsides there. Maybe it just took a while to get back. I mean, obviously the Achilles injury. But essentially, I'm just kind of at the point where, like, essentially what I'm asking you was, Cam Akers last like 4 games for real? And are you buying into that?
Yeah, so Cam Akers is kind of on double secret probation with me because I had him, I took him in a dynasty startup this past year, and he was the primary reason why I lost my first few games, and I just had miserable luck as well. But I mean, Akers was somebody I was counting on to, carry that team in one of those RotoViz triflexes. So I ended up barely missing the playoffs because my team finally righted itself, got everything going right. Barely missed the playoffs. Had I made the playoffs, I would have won the playoffs. So Akers has got some unfinished business with me. I want to see him do well. And I do think he will do well. I think him and Sean McVay just kind of didn't see eye to eye for most of the season. But it really felt like about, week 10 or so, week 11, they started kind of getting on the same page. Akers changed his running style a little bit. And then McVay quit fooling around with other running backs, started using them a little bit more. And all of a sudden, hey, everything's working. So, getting him in the 8th round, I'm super happy with that. And I was hoping I would be able to get like Dobbins or Akers. When we came around, I thought about taking one where I took Jordan Addison there and just doubling up on running back. But I thought, well, if I can get one of those guys to sneak around, I could probably do all right at running back and have a really strong wide receiver core.
Running backs off of injuries are always tough to project. In this draft, Breece Hall went at the third pick, in the 3rd round. If you kind of actually go to the best ball slim data for ADP right now, ADP is all over the place. It's as high as the first pick of the 2nd round and as low as the last pick of the 4th. It's coming off of ACL, but dynamic, Terp, Brees Hall is one of your guys. What is your thoughts on Brees Hall? Is this right around with the uncertainty about the injury, or you're like I'm taking this guy in the second round?
I usually stay away from guys that are coming off this injury. It's usually a rule that I put in. I don't know as of right this second if that rule will change because I love the player. It's really hard not to really be a fan of the kid, and you saw the talent that he has last year, but the injury is usually something that I just, especially from the running back position, that I usually just kind of scratch off, especially this early. Will that change? He's definitely somebody that could, change my opinion on it. But as of now, I would say I'm off Brees Hall.
Wow. Brees Hall, if it wasn't for the injury, you'd be all over him. He fits your exact player like archetype.
He's a top 7, 8 pick, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Brees Hall could have been going top 5. Even.
I can see he could easily be the number 1 running back without injury.
Right.
On the projection that he was going.
Yeah, exactly. And the things with Hall are that at least it was a clean ACL tear. There was no other ligament damage, anything else, which is what I really look at with the ACLs as to whether I even want to take a chance or not. Like Javonte Williams.
No shot.
I think there's by the time we get to September, I'm still going to be sitting at 0.0% Javonte, unless
he might start on the pup list, right?
What's that?
I said he very likely pup list.
Yeah, he very well could. So it's going to be interesting what Denver does at running back because Chase Edmonds just absolutely bombed.
Latavius Murray.
That's exactly it. I've started taking Murray.
Can we not talk about the Denver Broncos? I just really don't ever want to speak about them for at least 6 months.
Terp, did you have some bad experiences with them last year?
I won't even start, man. It's besides that cornball Russell Wilson. I had a ton of Cortland Sutton and Judy, Alberto. I mean, there's no Javonte Williams at all, none. But just a disaster.
We got to start like the commercial. If like you were a family member been affected by the 2022 Denver Broncos offense, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Yeah, that you are. Terp, though, my one last question, then, Dan, we're going to get into kind of your second half of the draft quickly because we kind of been focusing on like the first half. But Terp, you've had this take since way early last year. Tony Pollard, as the lead back on any other team, is running back 1 overall, maybe the number 1 overall player. Put a little damper, fractured leg in the playoffs. Should be okay, but just still those questions about, will he be able to carry a full workload? He went here in the 4th round, injury uncertainty. He might come back to Dallas. Who knows? Again, I know it's very easy to say. We've said it multiple times. The landing spot depends, but I just wanted to ask, is there a damper because of the injury, or are you still kind of all in on him depending on where he goes?
I would love for him to stay in Dallas without Ezekiel Elliott. If he was 100%,
yep,
which we don't know that yet. I mean, he should be fine. It should be no issues. But if he was 100% with no Ezekiel Elliott, I would take him in the top 5 of every single draft.
Even with the injury? Or no?
Without any injury.
Okay.
With the injury, the question's there. And then with the uncertainty of now, where's a good fit for him? He's a great player. Love the talent, but like, is he coming in at a discount now? Does Dallas bring him back? I mean, you never know what you're getting from Jerry Jones. I'm still on the Tony Pollard bandwagon. I'm not getting off it. I mean, 4th round in this kind of draft, I'm taking the shot 100 times out of 100. But I'm worried. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little worried because I made that statement, and I stand by the statement because the statement was kind of proven, even with Zeke there.
Hey, he was, running back 7 last year, with Zeke just getting touchdowns.
If he was in that offense 100%, I would say he's going to be the number 1 running back in fantasy football next year.
Dan, do you have any other thoughts on Tony Pollard to add on?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think he's surprised me with how low he's been going in drafts early this year. So I've been kind of loading up on Pollard in these early drafts. I think there are a lot of people who are concerned that Jerry Jones might try to take Bijan in the draft, and he'll have already franchise tagged Pollard, something like that. So I think there's a lot of concern about that. I'm not too concerned about the broken leg because usually just a bone break like that typically isn't a real problem for a running back, 7 months later. So I feel like Pollard is got a great shot to return excess value. I mean, he went running back 16 here. He was, I think you guys were saying 9. I think he was 7. It probably depends on your scoring system, but he was right up there. He was a top 10 back, so you're getting a nice discount on him here.
Yep, officially he was running back 7 in the FFPC formats last year, and in the never too early, he's going right where he went here as running back 16 at the 4.4 mark. Let me scroll down here quickly and look at the kind of second half of your draft. The second half is obviously you're getting really into the weeds of some players later, but this kind of second half starting right around round 14, did you have like a favorite pick here that you thought you got a real bargain, or is it just kind of you're taking some shots down the stretch?
Yeah, so especially in these 28 round drafts where you got to draft your kickers and defenses, those are all coming after the 14th round. So it's kind of not as deep of a draft as it seems in a way. Mm-hmm. But like I liked getting Rashad Penny in the 16th round. That didn't bother me at all. I think I think there's a good chance that Seattle just signs him. John Mechie is probably going to be a big part of the Houston offense this next year, assuming that everything went well with his recovery. I mean, I really liked him coming out of Alabama.
Loved him coming out of Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. So, those are just bets on talent. And then other than that, I was just kind of,
Jordan Love season.
What's that?
Jordan Love season.
Yes, exactly. Like Love is such an easy pick to make because I just don't think there's much chance that both him and Rodgers are back in Green Bay. One or the other.
I would say 0% with you. I don't think it's any way possible.
I don't think Rodgers is coming back. The way they're talking about it, it just seems like he's going somewhere else, and that would mean that Love is there. Yeah. I mean, that's what, round 25. I mean, you just gotta love
guys like Jimmy G and Hayden Hooker coming off an injury. Sam Howell, wild questions. I mean, he could be your best outside of Patrick Mahomes, your best quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why when I made the Mahomes pick, I was kind of figuring, hey, I can probably snag Love real late. Jacoby Brissett, another one. He's not even going in a lot of drafts, and if you're talking about the Superflex, he's definitely been going there, but he hasn't been going in the regular drafts at all. And I got him in round 28, and I think there's almost no chance that he's not starting somewhere this year, because I think he's going to be one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league still.
And that was definitely something I noticed. As you mentioned, we already talked to Jordan Love. You mentioned Jacoby Brissett. 2 quarterbacks late when there were some surprises. I get it. I'm a diehard Kentucky fan, as Terp knows. Levis is my guy, right? But even me as a Kentucky fan, I'm saying, like, I don't know if I see it. He went really high. Ritter went surprisingly high to me. And then there's guys like Love. And as you said, Brissett looked way better than Deshaun Watson. Just might as well take that in round 28. Very well could be a starting quarterback. Dan, I'm going to ask you, was there any other just picks in general that you remember that you're like, oh, I like that? For me, it was I'm all in on Roschon Johnson, Bijan's backup, and I'm just convinced just watching, if he wasn't the backup to Bijan, if he was at any other program, he'd be getting way more buzz than he is. I love wherever he's going to go, and I think he's going to build out a really good career. So I love that pick in round 20. But I didn't know if there was any outside of your picks that you remember kind of the second half of the draft, like, oh, I really like that value.
Yeah, I liked that one as well. I thought that was an awesome pick, and I'm high on him for the exact same reasons. I think he's a great player. The fact that he stuck with Texas even after Bijan came in, he could have gone somewhere else, and let his light shine. But he's such a team leader, and those are the kind of guys that the NFL just loves. So I think he's probably going to have a really good career because he's such a great size speed combo, and then the intangibles of what kind of leadership he brings and everything else. It's just those are the easy picks for me to make.
And Dan, I'm going to leave you with this question, right? And then Terp, I'm going to ask you the same, and then we'll get on out of here after a quick, nice little 30-minute show. Is you might have already named them in any of our past discussions on this show. Who's one player that you're just convinced the ADP is going to skyrocket come this time September, let's say, literally all the way down the line, that you're like, this guy's ADP is going to just be, we're going to look back at this and go, wow, that player went in that round. Terp, I'll ask you the same if you have one off the top of your head.
I think that one of the biggest questions in the offseason is what you do with the Browns guys. So Diamond Peoples-Jones, Amari Cooper, I'll use them both. It's just such a question right now because Kareem Hunt's likely out of there. Nick Chubb will start moving up draft boards, but you don't get the receiving upside as much, so I don't think he's going to skyrocket too much. David Njoku is another guy that, showed some flashes this year. I think the Browns are probably the number one team I'm looking at in the offseason and see, is Deshaun Watson just dusty like he looked like? Or was it just like a year to get back into playing shape and he's going to start looking like the guy that was in Houston? So if I had a name, it would probably be Amari Cooper.
If I'm answering my own question, then Dan will come back to, because I know that's a very big question to ask, just like springing right then. But mine is Jameson Williams, and I think the Jaguars in general. I think the Jaguars are that team that everyone's going to fall in love with that offense. The Ridleys, the Kirks. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to kind of
terrible
be
division.
super high.
Yep.
Yeah, just great. And so besides the Jaguars, though, I think Jameson Williams is, as soon as those training camp videos of him catching some bombs, Ben Johnson.
You saw the flashes this year. It's hard not to think he played barely any snaps, and you saw, I think it was 3, maybe 4 game-breaking, touchdowns. You saw the talent that's there. I mean, you got to still worry about, Jared Goff, and maybe they add somebody in the draft. But I love Jameson Williams. He was my number one receiver coming out, and the talent's there. Kid's talented.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd throw out Rashad Bateman because I do think that as long as he's healed up.
Such a sour name for me. Had him so much last year.
Another one for Turp.
Yeah, it's kind of a sour name for me too. But he's another one of those guys who's on double secret probation for me. I'm taking him because he's going so late. I mean, when you're getting him at wide receiver 47, and that's not really that unusual from the drafts I've been in. I've done like 10, 12 drafts that I'm either have finished or in the middle of. And
you've done 10 to 12 drafts already?
Well, either done or in the middle of. I think I've got 5 done and 6 maybe that I'm in right now. So I love the early season drafting. I typically I have a strong ROI in January, February, early March, just because I tend to be ahead of a lot of other people thinking about free agents, thinking about rookies and so forth like that. So it seems to help me out. So I like these early drafts.
You're a monster in the best possible way. We love hearing that someone's doing a dozen drafts already in February 9th.
That's nice.
I have maybe a little bit of a problem, but
don't we all?
Exactly. So yeah, I just and then of course a lot of them I'm doing are like the $35 ones. Still waiting for the 250s to start filling, but. Hopefully those will get going too. Though those are a lot tougher. The guys who do the 250s early are sharp as hell.
Sharp as hell. You're not getting many average Joes in there.
Absolutely.
No, exactly. Not. It's like when I walk into one of those rooms, I know every single person in there, and I know that I got my hands full.
100%.
Dan, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Anytime you come on, viewers are informed. You bring such great takes, you bring such great information, so thank you. We truly appreciate you joining us here for this Hardway draft recap.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. So it's a lot of fun to talk about these early drafts and just kind of dive into the players and get hearing what you guys are thinking too. It's valuable for me to get some other viewpoints because it's hard to get them right now. Most people are focused on the Super Bowl or maybe rookies, and they're not really talking about existing players.
We know one person
your Eagles jerseys
in
out
this
for this weekend.
Is focused on the Super Bowl.
Yes.
So Dan, thank you again. You can follow him at Overhyped Sleeper on Twitter, Goat District on Twitter and YouTube. Great information about the FFPC high stakes leagues there. Some of the best in the business. So Dan, thank you again for joining us. That's going to do it for us and our Hardway draft recap, our early ADP discussion. Terp says go Birds. I say go sign up. Never too early. Best ball tournament at myffpc.com. And then best ball leagues starting at $5, both best ball 28 round formats and best ball slim 20 rounds. Terp, I guess we're rooting for the Eagles.
You have
I'm
to.
Not. I'm not.
You have to. You can't.
You are.
All your friends are going to be excited. I'm going to be excited. I mean, I'm going to talk a lot. I'm going to make fun of Cowboys fans. Everything's going to be great.
I mean, it's gone swimmingly so
You
far. I just
can't
want
root
a
for
good,
Kansas City. It's like,
just want a good game. I
I
just want a
mean,
good game.
I just need you to be on the same team. We're both in terrible with our college basketball teams this
Oh,
year. Like,
we don't
not
need
even
to
going to
discuss
mention
that.
that because it just brings
Nope.
pain. So let's just form a common bond this week and go Birds.
Because I have to admit, the urge, even though not an Eagles fan, to just when you're seeing someone walk by, especially when you're not
Just
in
yell at
Philly,
them.
to see someone in Eagles gear, just the urge to say "Go Birds" is so powerful. I don't know
Sounds
why. It's just
lovely.
addicting.
Especially now. Everybody's going to look at you like you're a hero, even if you don't even like them.
So we'll be back at some point. I know once the drafts really start kicking off, the live ones, that is, there's a lot of slow ones going off at myffpc.com. Me and Terp will be back for live draft coverage. We'll see you guys then. Again, myffpc.com, never too early best ball tournament, $25,000 grand prize, and then the best ball leagues, both the slim and the 28 round version. You can find it all there. That's going to do it for myself and Terp. Thank you for listening.